I've always looked up to my big brother, William. He's got this unwavering loyalty that's hard to come by these days, especially when it comes to his best friend, Charles. Those two have been thick as thieves since high school, and honestly, Charles has been like an extension of our family for as long as I can remember. When Charles landed a new job and moved to the city, I could tell William was worried. It's not that Charles can't take care of himself, but he's always been a bit, well, introverted. So when I mentioned I was heading to the city for a weekend of partying, William practically begged me to check on Charles. Come on, Will, I groaned, rolling my eyes. I'm sure he's fine. You're such a mother hen sometimes. But the look in my brother's eyes, I couldn't say no. Damn those puppy dog eyes of his. So there I was, standing outside Charles's apartment building, feeling a bit ridiculous. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Knock on his door and say, hey, my brother thinks you're a hermit, want to hang out? I took a deep breath and pressed the buzzer. Charles's voice crackled through the intercom, sounding surprised but pleased. Helen, come on up. As the elevator climbed, I found myself fidgeting with my hair, suddenly conscious of my appearance. Why did I care? It was just Charles, for crying out loud. The door swung open and there he was, same old Charles with his messy brown hair and those startlingly blue eyes. But something was different. Maybe it was the way his t-shirt hugged his shoulders or the stubble on his jaw that made him look more rugged than I remembered. Hey, you, I said, grinning. Surprise visit from your best friend's annoying little sister. Charles laughed, a warm sound that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. You're hardly annoying, Helen. Come in, I'll make some coffee. I stepped inside, pleasantly surprised by how tidy and cozy the place was. No empty pizza boxes or piles of dirty laundry in sight. Take that, William. So, Charles called from the kitchen. What brings you to my neck of the woods? I plopped down on his surprisingly comfortable couch. Oh, just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd check out the city's nightlife scene. He returned with 2 steaming mugs, an amused smile playing on his lips. Ah, clubbing. Never quite understood the appeal myself. I took a sip of coffee, eyeing him over the rim of my mug. Don't tell me you've never been clubbing, Charles. He shrugged, looking a bit sheepish. Not really my scene. I prefer quieter evenings, I guess. It hit me then like a ton of bricks. Charles wasn't just introverted, he was lonely and probably more inexperienced in the ways of letting loose than I'd realized. Well, I heard myself saying, maybe you just need the right guide. What do you say we hit the town together tonight? The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. What was I doing? This wasn't part of the plan. I was supposed to check on him, not drag him out clubbing. Charles blinked, clearly taken aback. I don't know, Helen. I'm not sure I'd fit in at those places. I leaned forward, suddenly excited by the idea. Come on, it'll be fun. I'll show you the ropes. Plus, it's always safer to go out with a buddy, right? He seemed to mull it over, his brow furrowed in that adorable way it always did when he was thinking hard about something. Wait, adorable? Where did that come from? All right, he said finally, a mix of resignation and curiosity in his voice. I guess I could give it a shot, but I'm not promising I'll enjoy it. I grinned, feeling a rush of excitement. Trust me, Charles. By the end of the night, you'll be wondering why you never tried this before. As I watched him nervously run a hand through his hair, I couldn't help but feel a flutter in my stomach. This was going to be an interesting night, to say the least. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a little voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, I had ulterior motives for wanting to spend the evening with Charles. But I pushed that thought aside. This was about helping out a friend, nothing more, right? I left Charles's apartment with a determined spring in my step. The city bustled around me as I made my way to the nearest liquor store, my mind racing with ideas. Poor Charles, always so reserved. Tonight, I was going to change that. The bell chimed as I entered the store, cool air hitting my face. I grabbed a basket and started picking out an assortment of bottles. Vodka, rum, some mixers, and tequila. Definitely tequila. As I browsed, my eyes caught sight of a small display near the counter. Condoms. I hesitated for a moment, then grabbed a box. Better safe than sorry, right? Arms loaded with supplies, I practically skipped back to Charles's place. I knocked on his door, grinning when he answered. Special delivery, I chirped, pushing past him into the apartment. Charles's eyes widened as he took in my haul. Helen, I thought we were just having a quiet night in. Oh, we are, I assured him, heading straight for the kitchen. But who says quiet can't be fun? I set about mixing our first round of drinks, feeling Charles hover uncertainly behind me. You really don't have to go to all this trouble, he murmured. I turned, pressing a colorful concoction into his hand. Nonsense. Now drink up, handsome. As the afternoon wore on, I kept the drinks flowing. Charles was hesitant at first, but I could see him starting to relax. His shoulders loosened, his laugh came easier. We sprawled on his couch, swapping stories and jokes. You know, Charles said, his words slightly slurred, I never thought I'd be doing this with you. I raised an eyebrow. Drinking. He shook his head, a crooked smile on his face. No, just hanging out like this. You've always been Will's little sister, you know. Well, I'm not so little anymore, I teased, giving him a playful wink. Charles's cheeks flushed, and not just from the alcohol. No, you're definitely not, he agreed, his eyes lingering on me a beat too long. The air between us suddenly felt charged. I leaned in closer, my heart racing. Charles, I murmured, have you ever thought about? But before I could finish, Charles's phone buzzed loudly. He jumped, fumbling to pull it out of his pocket. It's Will, he said, looking torn. I bit back a groan of frustration. Of course, my brother would interrupt now. You should answer it, I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. Charles nodded, standing up a bit unsteadily. I'll just be a minute, he promised, stepping into the other room. Left alone, I took a deep breath. What was I doing? This was Charles, for crying out loud, my brother's best friend. But as I heard his low voice murmuring in the other room, I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement. Tonight was turning out to be far more interesting than I'd anticipated. When sit closer to me after coming back, I felt a spark of boldness electrify my veins. Our conversation had slowed, each joke or shared memory now laced with an unmistakable tension. I inched nearer, closing the gap between us until our bodies nearly brushed against each other, our faces mere inches apart. My heartbeat drummed in my ears as I inhaled deeply, gathering the courage I needed. I leaned in and kissed him. Charles flinched in surprise, but that hesitation vanished quickly, replaced by a fervor that blindsided me. For someone who professed a preference for solitude, he responded with an intensity that left my head spinning. His touch was warm and sure, and expert's movements that belied any supposed inexperience. Charles, who I thought I would have to coax out of his shell, had flipped the script. I couldn't help but admire him. He was impressive, if you know what I mean. Everything else faded, the world, the room, the dim light casting shadows on the walls. There was only the two of us, connected in a way that was unexpected. After everything, we collapsed, and we couldn't help but smile, the reality of what just happened sinking in, though the significance still seemed almost surreal. You know, I whispered, breaking the silence, I never would have pegged you as someone who could, well, surprise me like this. Charles chuckled, the sound rumbling from deep in his chest. Guess you never really knew me, huh? I propped myself up on one elbow, my emerald green eyes meeting his deep blue ones, now softened in the dim light. I guess not. But there's a lot I'm curious about. He raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk tugging at his lips. Is that so? Ask away then. As the night stretched on, we talked softly, our words blending into the warm atmosphere. Charles spoke about his childhood, growing up with academic parents who had high expectations but little time. He reminisced about late nights coding in his room and the solace he found in the clacking of keys and glowing screens. Do you remember when Will and I would drag you along to our games, he asked, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. Yeah, I nodded, smiling. You guys would be so serious about it, and I had no clue what was going on. But you were always patient, even when I messed up. Charles's laugh was soft, almost careful, as if he were savoring the memory. I guess I've always liked helping people. It's easier to understand computers, though. They don't judge you. People don't judge you either, Charles, I said, leaning in closer. You've got this. Genuine kindness. I think that's why I will trust you so much. Your brother means a lot to me, Charles admitted, his eyes earnest. He's been my rock through a lot of stuff. I felt a surge of affection for both men, recognizing the deep bond they shared. I get it. He can be a pain sometimes, but he's solid. Charles's hand stilled on my back, and for a moment he looked vulnerable, almost hesitant. Helen, there's something I've never told anyone. My curiosity peak. What is it? He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. I have a lot of self doubt. Maybe that's why I cling to routines and familiar things. It's easier than stepping out and risking failure. I reached out, placing a hand on his cheek, forcing his eyes back to mine. You're not a failure, Charles. Far from it. Everyone struggles. It's just part of being human. His sigh was deep, almost relieved. Thanks, Helen. It means a lot hearing that from you. As the night bled into early morning, our conversation turned lighter. We shared stories, those silly little moments that rarely see the light of day. I told him about my disastrous first attempt at yoga and my penchant for contemporary romance novels. He confessed his secret love for cooking shows and how he once tried to make a souffle that ended in a puff of smoke. Our laughter filled the room, mingling with the intimacy between us. The connection I felt with Charles grew deeper, solidifying into something tangible and undeniable. This wasn't just a random hookup, it was the beginning of something uniquely ours. Eventually, reality crept back in, and I knew I had to report back to Will. Charles walked me to the door, his hand lingering on my waist. I turned to face him, a smile tugging at my lips. Don't worry, I'll tell Will you're doing just fine, I said, my voice laced with a hint of mischief. Might even tell him I'll have to check on you regularly. Charles's eyes sparkled with amusement. I wouldn't mind that, not at all. I gave him one last kiss, a promise of sorts, before stepping out into the cool night air. The city buzzed around me, but I felt a new, thrilling energy coursing through my veins. This visit was the start of something intense, an adventure that only Charles and I shared. As I walked down the quiet street, I knew our little secret would remain just that, at least for now. And that knowledge, coupled with the memories of our shared night, filled me with anticipation for whatever came next.